The Crossbones, page 189 to the end. Wednesday, June 29th at 4:23 p.m. When you're underground, it doesn't matter if it's day or night outside. It's cold down there, shadows bounce on thin light, and you can't stop thinking about how you're going to get out when the trouble starts. I did a good job of losing the group when I realized where I was on the Apostles' map. No one seemed to care about the disheveled teenager who'd gone missing. The route the Apostles sent me on led quickly to a roped-off area, screaming with no admittance signs. In that section, the walls came in close, and the light was almost non-existent. I fished my flashlight out of my backpack and kept at it, twisting and turning as the ceiling got lower and lower. By the time I reached what appeared to be the last turn, I couldn't hear the tour guide's voice anymore, and I was slouched over like an old man. I was lost in a labyrinth of underground tunnels, alone in the dark, or so I thought. Now that I'm sitting on the hot June pavement, staring at my phone and watching the video footage I captured, I realized something. I wasn't just having a mental breakdown. The ghost of old Joe Bush really was there. My paranoid brain didn't make that up. He was sitting on a wooden crate, staring off to the side, moving in that otherworldly way he has, fast, then slow, then fast again. His voice was sand and dirt, as if it hadn't had a drop of water in a decade. And if I'm not mistaken, this thing had definitely turned benevolent. In other words, the ghost wanted to help me. It wanted to protect me. Who am I to care if it's Henry or some possessed version of Henry or not Henry at all? The point is, if I tell my dad or the cops or whoever, there's a chance me and Sarah might end up all alone out here. And according to the ghost of old Joe Bush, we're in real danger because the other guy, the Raven, doesn't mess around. Apparently, we've upset him and he's out for blood. The fact that I found what I came for in the Portland Underground is a real problem. I know this in part because of what I was told down there, but even more because of what I found down there, which I refuse to write in this journal until I get safely back to Skeleton Creek. I'm not even sure what it is. All I know is I gotta get home and fast, or I'll be grounded for the rest of my life. Who am I kidding? When my dad finds out what I did, my life as I know it will be over. Wednesday, June 29th at 10:10 p.m. One flat tire and a whole lot of oil later, I'm finally home. Unfortunately, I'm not the only person who's here. I pulled off to the curb on Main Street, and I can see my dad's pickup sitting in the driveway. Is there a worse feeling than staring at your dad's truck, knowing he's inside, knowing you're in trouble? If there is, I haven't felt it. It might be a while before I get back to my journal, and it's a fair bet they'll take my phone and my laptop the second I walk in the door. One last text to Sarah, and then it's time to face the music. I'm home safe. Hope to bust this thing wide open within the hour, but I may not have a phone. Hold tight. See you on the other side. Thursday, June 30th. I don't know what time it is, and I don't care. I'm alone again, and this time it's a good thing. A lot has happened in the past 24 hours, all of which I just got done telling to Sarah. So that's the first thing. They gave me my phone back. It's funny how finding something incredible, like gold or treasure, will cover a multitude of lies and deceptions. When I got home, my parents freaked out, but not in the way that I expected them to. They didn't yell at me or start taking my things. They did the opposite. My mom hugged me hard for a long time. She kept saying how sorry she was that she left me home alone. My dad touched me on the shoulder, and when I looked at him, there were tears in his eyes. I wouldn't have imagined they'd been that worried. But the truth was, they still hadn't recovered from almost losing me on the dredge. What kind of crazy son did they have? How much longer would I even be alive? I'd made it clear I was a reckless kid, untrustworthy, heading for the rocks. It was the first time in my life that I felt something deeper than guilt. I felt remorse. Remorse for making my parents feel as if they might lose me at any moment. They'd done a good job raising me, but I had to imagine that I was making them feel like they were the lamest parents on earth. What kind of parents raise a son who can't stop putting his life at risk? The love fest lasted about a minute. Then the hammer came down, and I was reminded that, yes, my parents did know how to discipline me. Not only was I going to have this new and crummy feeling of remorse for a while, I was also getting grounded and working at the fly shop with no pay until every hour I'd left the shop closed had been made up times 10. My dad's logic being that we'd lost a lot of sales while I was out joyriding. There were two places I could go, home and the fly shop. By some miracle of good luck, they let me keep my phone and my laptop, and for this I was incredibly thankful. Not being able to tell Sarah what was going on for days on end would have been impossibly hard. After the hugs and the consequences, I came clean about Portland. I wouldn't call it squeaky clean, but I told them a lot. I did not, however, mention the road trip Sarah had been on and the many stops she'd made. I shortened my story by a long shot and stuck to only the facts I absolutely needed to share, which were these. I found an encoded message in the dredge, but I didn't tell anyone about it. Technically, this is true. The message has been lost, so I can't show it to anyone. Sorry about that. This one is a stretch, unless you count under my mattress as lost. But I couldn't show the skull puzzle to just anyone. I had to keep it safe. Part 2 of the message was hidden in Portland, which is why I had to go there. It felt important. Again, technically true. I found what I went looking for, and it led right back where I started, Skeleton Creek. The Crossbones is older and more mysterious than anyone imagined. They stole things and hid them. I think I may have found one of these things. I did not go into any detail about the Crossbones. There was more to find, and I didn't want anyone trying to stop me. My dad was curious about a lot of what I'd said, but mostly he was interested in one thing. What do you mean you found something? I could tell what he was thinking. The last time my son discovered a hidden stash or whatever, it ended up being worth $40 million. Maybe he was thinking about expanding the fly shop. I don't know, but his tone had changed. Ryan McCrae, the guy who saved the town from ruin, had found something else. This could be good. It was 10:40 at night, but I went ahead and set things in motion anyway. We're going to need to talk with Gladys Morgan, I said. What in the world do you want with her? My mom asked. She's got the keys to the library, and I need to get in there. My dad was already pulling out his cell phone, looking at me like, what else do you need, son? Can I get you a Coke? It was bizarre, but it gave me the freedom to really go for it. I'm going to need a crowbar and the biggest hammer you can find. An axe might be helpful. Honey, get the boy an axe, my dad said, and then he was at the tiny Skeleton Creek phone book. It was a pamphlet, really, dialing Gladys Morgan's home phone. It was kind of hilarious when she answered. My dad had to pull the phone away from his ear, and even I could hear her yell, who in the blankety-blank-blank is calling me in the middle of the night? There's something darn funny about an old librarian with a potty mouth. Even my dad was smiling. We walked down Main Street, carrying the tools we were going to need. I had the axe, my mom had the crowbar, and my dad had a sledgehammer. We must have looked like a gang in search of a midnight rumble. I imagined we were walking in slow motion, like in a movie trailer, which was just dumb enough to make me smile. If Gladys Morgan was concerned when he'd called, she was downright out of her mind with worry when we showed up carrying tools of destruction. You're not coming in here with an axe and a giant hammer. Forget it. The time had come, there on the steps, to spill some of the beans. Gladys, I said, your library has something very important in it. It's been there a long time, since before you showed up, and I think you'll be pleased if you let me rip the floor apart. Gladys barred the door with her body and looked at my dad like his son had lost his marbles. We couldn't get her away from the door until my dad called the mayor, a known night owl, and told him what was going on. Mayor Blake is maybe the most opportunistic person I've ever met, and the idea that something else of serious value might be hidden in Gladys's library was all he needed to hear. The building was owned by the city. He had his own keys, and he was there in under 5 minutes. Gladys waited on the front steps, too distraught to look. While my mom comforted her as the axe came down, my dad is about as good as anyone I know at ripping things apart, and he made quick work of the old floorboards. Once he had a hole in the middle of the small room, the mayor went to work with the crowbar, prying up board after board. When the opening was 4 feet in diameter, we were all down on our knees, peering inside. There was a giant trunk down there, too big for one guy to lift out, but the adrenaline was pumping, and so the mayor and the fly shop proprietor of Skeleton Creek heaved it up into the library in no time. When they opened it up, there was a severe case of disappointment written on both their faces. My dad looked at me as if I'd just bankrupted the family. The mayor was ashen. Not only had he destroyed a perfectly good floor, he'd almost certainly incurred the wrath of the cantankerous town librarian, a very bad move. It was Gladys who saved me. I pulled an envelope out of my pocket, the same size and shape and color as the one I'd found on the dredge. Only this one had been hidden in the Portland underground for who knew how long. I took out the card inside and showed it to my librarian. X marks the spot on the floor of the town library with the words, Jefferson Library, 287 volumes. Gladys Morgan looked at the card, then the trunk of books, then the card. If I didn't know better, I would have sworn she almost fainted and fell into the gaping hole we just created in her floor. She pulled one of the books out, perfect condition, then another and another. She ran her weathered fingers over the spines. The mayor, sensing all was not lost, ventured a question. Are you going to punch me, Gladys Morgan? She didn't answer. In fact, I don't recall how long she remained quiet, but eventually she broke her silence and smiled like I had never seen her smile before. It was the smile of a person who loved books and had found a rare and priceless treasure of words. The Crossbones had tried to burn Jefferson's house to the ground. They'd tried to drive him into bankruptcy more than once. Those things didn't do him in, but there was one thing they knew he loved more than anything in the world, books. The Jefferson Library became the nation's library eventually, the very beginning of the Library of Congress. But to this day, almost 200 years later, 287 books from that library had remained missing. The most precious books of the 6,487 volume collection had never been found, until now. Me and Sarah had found the rarest collection of books in the country, the missing books from the Thomas Jefferson Library, hidden beneath our own crummy little library all this time. You have never seen a prouder librarian in all your life. Monday, July 4th, 12:14 p.m. Could there be a more perfect day to reveal our discovery to the rest of the world? I don't think so. Independence Day. Our mayor called a press conference on the steps of our town library. Gladys stood on one side, I stood on the other, and the TV cameras rolled. Not only was Skeleton Creek home to a haunted dredge filled with gold, it was also the resting place of the nation's most sought-after collection of missing books. What was it worth? Priceless, he gushed. The books would be returned to the Library of Congress, and the hole in the floor of our quaint little room of books on Main Street would never be filled. The axe that flew and crowbar that pried would remain right where they'd been used. It would, in time, become a location as important as the home of the Liberty Bell or the Oregon Trail. A tourist attraction every family should see at least once in their lifetime. Mayor Blake really knew how to lay it on thick, which I suppose is a good thing to have in a mayor. I had a feeling he was going to sail through the next election without much trouble. I felt bad about Gladys's floor, but she didn't seem to mind. Soon they'd move the library somewhere else and give her a real book budget. We might even get some books on tape and a computer in there, which, I had to admit, made me feel pretty good too. There was just one thing I didn't feel great about as people streamed up the steps to shake my hand. Sure, we'd solved a major mystery right under our parents' noses, and it was true we'd given something back to the world that had long been lost. But it didn't change the fact that Sarah was going to have to drive home in a few days. It didn't change the fact that the ghost of old Joe Bush had given me one more envelope that night underground in Portland. It was a black envelope, old and marred at the edges. Inside, another puzzle. Only this time, it was no skull puzzle. In place of the skull was a black raven. We'd made him angry. This raven, whoever he or it was. There were 5 more places to go, none of which I'd figured out yet, and Sarah was going to have to visit them on her return trip to Boston. It was the only way. She'd find the ghost of old Joe Bush out there. She'd find the raven out there, and she'd uncover the last secret of the Crossbones. My guess, whatever it is, sits right under our noses. All roads lead back to Skeleton Creek in the end, I'm sure of it. But the most terrifying part of all, the part that will give me nightmares for weeks after, I know who the raven was, and I know what he carried around with him. I figured it out that night, walking toward the library with my dad and my mom, carrying an axe that would rip open the past. Fitz never showed up for the fishing trip, my dad said as we walked. He up and quit at the last second, left me high and dry. Longest 2 days of my life trying to guide 4 fishermen by myself. Could it have been Fitz outside my window that last night before I left, watching me, wondering where I might go the next day? All I could think of the second Dad told me about Fitz was that smell. The smell of burning oil all the way to Portland. And then I knew. It was Fritz who had put the GPS phone in the glove box. I'd asked my parents about it, and they had no idea what I was talking about. He'd followed me all the way out of town on that crazy motorcycle of his. It was that bike of his I'd smelled, not my mom's junker. Thank God I'd lost him when I turned off that cell phone, because if I hadn't, who knows what might have happened in the underground. I might never have made it out of there alive. Monday, July 4th at 4 p.m. I rode my bike out to Fitz's trailer, but I knew I wouldn't find anyone at home. The motorcycle was gone, and so was the truck Fitz's dad used to haul wood out of the forest. The sorry little mobile home was abandoned, but on the steps there was a fly box, the one Fitz always carried around in his fishing vest. I opened it up and found a note inside. Ryan, maybe we'll see each other again sometime, but I doubt it. My dad, he asked me to keep an eye on you. He's not someone you say no to. I was supposed to figure out where you were going. I was supposed to take whatever you found and bring it to my dad. But I lost you out there. My motorbike isn't as fast as your mom's minivan. Not knowing where you were headed to might have been a good thing in the end. My dad was angry, really angry. He says we're leaving in the middle of the night and we're not coming back. He says I failed to live up to the family name. Look, Ryan, you don't know my dad. He's not a nice guy. I think you might have set him off. Be careful. If I can swing a little help, I will. I'll find a way to get in touch. Keep tying flies. You'll get better. It just takes practice. Fitz. My dad wasn't the only one carrying an axe. There was a certain man of the woods, a loner, a woodcutter, the dad of the only friend I had in town, a guy who called himself the Raven. The last 3 Crossbone members at war, the Apostle, Henry, the Raven. One of them dead, one of them gone off his rocker, one of them after me. 3 hidden treasures, the gold, the Jefferson books, and what? I wish I could say I know all the answers, but I don't. I rode my bike back into Skeleton Creek, Fitz's old fly box in my shirt pocket, and thought about how far I was from safe. My journey wasn't over yet.